Hello everyone. Today we are going to learn about the next topic that is called as the sulfur cycle. As we know that the elemental sulfur which is available, that elemental sulfur which is not directly used by the plants or absorbed by the plants, so that elemental sulfur is get converted into the different sulfur containing compounds. So that cycle is called as or journey is called as sulfur cycle. So let us see what happens one by one in sulfur cycle. What are the steps involved in sulfur cycle? Okay. So first step is called as an sulfur oxidation. So what happens, as we know that elemental sulfur which is not available by the plants or not absorbed by the plants, so that elemental sulfur is get converted into the sulfate. That elemental sulfur is get converted into the sulfate through the process of bacterial oxidation with the help of bacteria, that is thiobacillus thiooxidans. That is, elemental sulfur get oxidized with the help of bacteria, that is thiobacillus thiooxidans, and that elemental sulfur get converted into the sulfate. So this is about the sulfur oxidation, first step. Then second step is called as in sulfate assimilation, that is absorption. So sulfate assimilation means what happens here? The sulfate is assimilated or absorbed by the plants. As we know that the plants absorb the sulfur in the form of sulfate. So it is very important objective that sulfate is absorbed by the plants. So sulfate is assimilated or absorbed by the plants for synthesis of the proteins containing compounds or sulfur containing compounds like the amino acids like cysteine and methionine. That is, sulfur is absorbed by the or assimilated by the plants for the synthesis of the sulfur containing the amino acids like cysteine and methionine. These are the two important amino acids which containing sulfur containing compounds. Okay, so this is second step. Then third step is called, or in case of third, whatever the sulfate which is absorbed by the plants to make the proteins. Which are the proteins or acids? The cysteine and methionine. So what happens, that proteins or amino acids like the cysteine and methionine, it's degraded, and after degradation that are transformed into the hydrogen sulfide. Okay, here it is given the fourth step, that is H2S is formed by the microbes. That is, after the degradation of organic sulfur containing compounds, here after the degradation of the organic sulfur containing compounds like methane, methionine and cysteine, what happens, that proteins after the degradation of that compounds, it is converted into the hydrogen sulfide with the help of bacteria known as D-sulfovibrio. It is called as D-sulfovibrio. Okay, so the third step is degradation. Okay, so this is your fourth step, that is after degradation of organic sulfur containing compounds like cysteine and methionine is degraded and converted into the hydrogen sulfide with the help of D-sulfovibrio desulfuricans. Next step, last step, that H2S, whatever the hydrogen sulfide is formed after the decomposition of organic sulfur compounds, that H2S is oxidized to the elemental sulfur by the bacteria, that is Chromatium or Chromium or Thiobacillus, and that hydrogen sulfide is get again converted into the elemental sulfur. So again that elemental sulfur is again oxidized with the help of bacteria Thiobacillus and converted into the sulfate. So that process or that cycle is continuously carried out. So again we discuss here first one. The first step in sulfur cycle, sulfur oxidation. In case of sulfur oxidation, elemental sulfur which is not absorbed by the plants is converted into the sulfate with the help of bacteria thiobacillus thioxidans, first step. Again second step, that sulfate here, that sulfate after the conversion of that sulfate is absorbed by the plants for the synthesis of sulfur containing amino acids like the cysteine and methionine to make the proteins. Okay, then next what happens here, after the degradation, third step, after the degradation of that proteins containing compounds, that is methionine and cysteine, they are converted into the hydrogen sulfide. Okay, so degradation is takes place in third step, that is the degradation. Then fourth step, that is sulfate reduction. So sulfate reduction, in case of that, H2S is formed by the microbes, or here at the same time the sulfate reduction is takes place, or sulfate is directly reduced into the hydrogen sulfide with the help of bacteria, that is desulfovibrio desulfuricans. And next one, whatever the sulfate which is converted after the bacterial reduction from the sulfate and from the organic sulfur containing compound, whatever the hydrogen sulfide is converted, so that hydrogen sulfide, it again get oxidized, it get again oxidized in fifth step. After the oxidation of that hydrogen sulfur, again it backs to the elemental sulfur, again it converted into the elemental sulfur. Then elemental sulfur is again oxidized into the sulfate. So that process is continuously carried out, and that cycle, that is elemental sulfur into sulfate, sulfate into the different sulfur containing compounds, then sulfur containing compounds converted into hydrogen sulfide, hydrogen sulfide is converted into the elemental sulfur. So that process is continuously begins or carried out. So that process is called as a sulfur cycle. So you can draw the diagram of that sulfur cycle along with the different steps and the reaction which is given. So in different books the different steps or different reactions are also given, but this is the simple way of to listen or to understand the sulfur cycle. So if you have any difficulty in that sulfur cycle, so you can ask me. Thank you.